Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. And welcome to Friday's edition of the dceu Daily. I want you to put yourselves in the position of David Zaslav and Discovery. You've merged with Warner Media and you go, yes, DC live action, the most valuable thing we've got. Let's go to work. Hello, Walter. Let's talk about this franchise. So you hear all about it and you hear that there's a Snyderverse and then there's a Hamadaverse. You hear that James Gunn's The Suicide Squad didn't make a lot of money at the box office. You hear that Wonder Woman 84 is a calamity and Birds of Prey didn't make it very well in the global box office either. What do you make of this? How can you fix this absolute mess? But Walter Hamada says, great news, boss. I'm trying to fix that via a multiversal strategy. Well, that's a good idea. Via The Flash, we're going to reboot the whole franchise. And, the Snyderverse will be in its own pocket universe and we move forward. Well, that's good. Where's Superman in all of this, Walter? Oh, well, guess what, boss? We're replacing Superman with Supergirl. But the incoming boss understands how important Superman is. And he's thinking, how's that going to work? Don't worry, boss. J.J. Abrams is producing a Ta-Nehisi Coates written Black Superman. Wow, really? Well, I know about Superman, David Zaslav says. Is it going to be President Superman, Calvin Ellis, or is it going to be Val Zod? It's going to be neither. We're race-bending Superman to have a black Clark Kent. So if you're David Zaslav, because we're putting ourselves in that position right now, you're thinking, what the fuck? Not only are you replacing Superman with Supergirl, which is very toxic, right, in its own right, you're then, race-bending Superman when you've got two brilliant Supermen of colour in the comics. So there's not a redeemable element within this franchise. It's a mess. So you're David Zaslav, you've got people screaming at you, restore the Snyderverse. And then you've got a few fanboys, no, we hate the Snyderverse. We want to see the Flash movie. Oh my God, man, did you see the Flash costume? Did you see the Blue Beetle costume? You see, Mick? These films are happening because we saw the costumes. Yes, and of course, Wonder Twins was cancelled as well. I have an exclusive article to read here for you on today's dceu Daily by Mikey Sutton, and David Zaslav and Discovery are not happy with Walter Hamada. Warner Brothers Discovery not impressed with Walter Hamada's DC films. Now there's a surprise. Written by Mikey Sutton, Editor-in-Chief. Warner Brothers Discovery feels that Walter Hamada's DC films was a failure. In fact, DC Films didn't compete with the rival Marvel Studios. Rather, DC Films copied it and failed. And you can see that. They failed with Justice League. That was their plan, because you don't take somebody else's vision and turn it into something else. Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav inherited a mess, a source observed. DC Films should have been the crown jewel of Warner Brothers. Instead, it's like a car with no headlights driving in the dark. That's from a source. And, I couldn't agree more with this. There's not a better analogy to use. It is an absolute mess. And I understand that some of you are so deep within your fandom and hatred of Zack Snyder, you can't see that. Zack Snyder's universe does have an identity and a vision, but it doesn't have the box office potential of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so that's an issue as well. Zaslav fired the first shot with Killing the Wonder Twins live-action film on HBO Max. Specifically, budget cuts chopped the project from the schedule. Zaslav balked at its $75 million price tag. Wow, that's a very expensive streaming movie or TV show or whatever it was going to be. However, even if it was cheaper, insiders added Zaslav would have still cancelled it, a source revealed. Zaslav felt the Wonder Twins wouldn't even have clicked on the CW. It's too obscure and silly. I'm not sure if it couldn't have worked on the CW. That's interesting. It is very obscure though, but not necessarily obscure enough for it not to work. Let's be clear about this. If you've got a successful DC Extended Universe, this could be the next movie or the next streaming show. It could work, but you've got to earn the right to do these things. The Wonder Twins debuted on an all-new Super Friends Hour cartoon in 1977. They later appeared in Super Friends number 7 that year, but the Wonder Twins don't have much of a following. In fact, many fans consider them a joke. But then again, they considered Aquaman a joke before James Wan and Zack Snyder got to work on that character. The same could be said for Hamada's DC films. Granted, the problems began before Hamada walked in the door. That's very true. Warner Brothers Discovery not impressed with Walter Hamada's DC films. First of all, Warner Brothers butchered 2016's Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. Specifically, they chopped 30 minutes from director Zack Snyder's movie. Critics slapped the theatrical version with a 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. And here's the problem. When you bring in someone like Zack Snyder, he creates something you're uncomfortable with because you don't think it's going to do well in the mainstream global box office, so you start chopping the shit out of it. If you didn't bring him in the first place, it would have been a much wiser move for your platform, as much as I love him and what he's done with DC. It's just not the thing to go with. Afterwards, the film didn't grab the $1 billion global executive salt. No, it wasn't even the $1 billion they wanted. BVS should have made around $2 billion. And I'll die on that hill. A movie with Superman and Batman in it. Jesus Christ. A film with 3 fucking Spider-Man made just under $2 billion. So a film with Batman and Supes should have made around the same. The longer R-rated Ultimate Edition proved Warner Brothers' mishandling. DC Films then formed that year. Its goal was to basically replicate Marvel Studios away from Snyder's darker vision. Thus, director Joss Whedon emasculated Snyder's Justice League. In addition, DC Films gave David Ayer's Suicide Squad the Guardians of the Galaxy treatment. Hamada became DC Films president in 2018. Since then, they've gained no ground against Marvel Studios. So it's interesting. When he first came in, there were films like Aquaman that made $1 billion, Shazam that hit well with a lot of children and families. That must be said. But then it went from bad to worse. With Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 84, The Suicide Squad is a really, really good movie, but unfortunately it didn't do well at the box office for one reason or the other. We don't know if it wasn't for the pandemic and day and date if it wouldn't do better. I'm sure it would have, but still it wouldn't have got the $1 billion a James Gunn movie should be. Let's not forget how big Guardians of the Galaxy has been. Granted, both 2018's Aquaman and 2019's Joker grabbed $1 billion worldwide, but Hamada didn't want Joker. And this is the facts. One of the most successful movies in his leadership was a film he didn't want. And he had to be overruled by Toby Emmerich. Because like him or not, when it comes to proper films, Emmerich knows what he's doing. He hasn't got a clue about DC. I mean, look at the Elvis Presley movie. A great decision, bringing in Baz Luhrmann to make an Elvis Presley biopic. It's going to land big for them. But in terms of DC, Emmerich shouldn't be anywhere near it. Director Todd Phillips admitted they put a guy in charge at DC, Walter Hamada, who had been running a small horror label at New Line. So he didn't have muscle to stop it. And I'm not saying he would have, but he didn't get it. In other words, Hamada got lucky. Unfortunately, he followed up Joker with a trio of disappointments: Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 84, and The Suicide Squad fizzled at the box office. Although Matt Reeves' The Batman performed well, it still earned below Batman vs Superman: Dawn of Justice. Do not be comparing the box office to a film with Batman and Superman with a film merely with a Batman in and the beginning of a trilogy or a lot more. It made good bank for what it was. 3-hour movie, very serious, very gritty, not a lot of action. It's the godfather of Batman movies as far as I'm concerned. In addition, Zaslav doesn't agree with DC Films' disconnected franchises. Instead, he prefers a cohesive cinematic universe. Now, this is an interesting thing before we go on. We must kind of speak in Hamada's defense here. Hamada was trying to create a multiverse strategy. So he was going to create a proper franchise out of it. And ultimately, his plans were interesting. The Flash, Batgirl, Michael Keaton was going to be the new Batman. So it was all going to align together, even though it was a multiverse strategy. But I still feel when you look at all the different universes, it can be very confusing. You know, with Arrowverse, with Doom Patrol, with Titans, it can be confusing, and it's a more sellable commodity to have one universe, one franchise coming from television streaming and the theatrical model. I scooped Zaslav's plans for a new DC Studios on February the 1st. Hamada hangs on until Zaslav chooses his replacement. Indeed, you don't remove someone without anyone to take their place, of course. Warner Brothers Discovery feels they had the right idea with Snyder's DCEU. Alas, corporate interference botched its success. So Zaslav likes the Snyderverse. He at least likes the idea of one universe continuing. As I say, the thing I think he likes is the thing that I like mostly. It's got a vision and it's got an identity. Does that mean he's ready to restore the Snyderverse? Not necessarily. In a way, Zack Snyder's Justice League restarts the DCEU. Forget Whedon's version ever happened. Warner Brothers Discovery seeks to keep what worked. So this is interesting. We'll talk about that after this article. Zack Snyder's Justice League on HBO Max did just that. It was a hit. Going forward, Warner Brothers Discovery prioritizes theatrical. Zaslav isn't much of a risk taker. His choice is to start from scratch or restore the Snyderverse. Faith, Alfred, faith. Only patience is needed now. So, a very interesting article from Scooper Mikey Sutton. So, I told you this, didn't I? I've told you this for weeks, that Zaslav either wants to restore the Snyderverse, forget everything else ever happened, or start again. So what's the most bankable commodity here? I think there is a bankable element with restoring the Snyderverse because there'll be hype and anticipation. Everyone will be talking about it, people who hate it, people who love it. There'll be nothing else spoken about if he restores the Snyderverse. But I fear and suspect very quickly with the way Snyder does things, we could still go back to what we had after BVS. If he's not much of a risk taker, it's that element that will scare Zaslav. But if he starts again, he can mold it the way he wants with his own leader. So it looks like from what Mikey's saying that Hamada is only still in position because they haven't found his replacement yet. So sooner rather than later, he will be removed as DC Films president. They will form a DC Studios and put a head of that studio sooner rather than later. This is the best way to go. This is the only way to go. Because, as I say, it's very interesting what Mikey's saying because it's something I've been saying, you know, and I'm sure Mikey has better sources than me, but my sources have been telling me exactly the same thing. That Zaslav isn't happy. None of us are happy. We know it's a mess. When you look at the Snyderverse versus the Hamadaverse discourse, that's one thing. That's problematic in itself. But then you go to the problems with Ezra Miller in the Flash movie, and we'll read about it very shortly. The problems with Amber Heard in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. 2 movies now that are very controversial, but not because of said movies. Although, having seen the Flash movie and seeing what they do with Supergirl, and, you know, what they do with Superman, nothing basically, that's a problem in itself. Zaslav knows this. So as I say, next month, big announcements are coming. And yes, movies could be cancelled. You may not want those movies to be cancelled. You may be getting, you know, very excited down in your shorts about these costumes being leaked. But it doesn't mean anything because they delayed a bunch of movies earlier this year and still were advertising said movies to all be released this year. So this studio can't be trusted in anything it announces or anything it shows. We still don't have a release date for Batgirl, very suspicious considering the Michael Keaton connections from the Flash movie. I suspect that's why Batgirl hasn't been given a release date. So we're going to have to wait and see what decision Zaslav's going to reach. But it does look like the DCEU in its current form isn't long for this world. Aquaman 2 story details reveal origin villain twist. DC President Walter Hamada reveals that the focus of the plot of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was already shifting away from Amber Heard's Mera by Brendan Klein of Screen Rant. The discussions around the future of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom have revealed an interesting twist involving the original film's villain. The first Aquaman, which was directed by James Wan and became the highest grossing DCEU film after making over $1 billion at the international box office, saw Jason Momoa reprising his role from 2017's Justice League. The film followed the Atlantean hero as he faced off against the vengeful pirate Manta, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, who secretly teamed up with Aquaman's half-brother Atlantean King Marius, Patrick Wilson, who wants to become Ocean Master. Over the course of his adventures, Aquaman also developed a bond with Mera Amber Heard, who was betrothed to all. Unfortunately, the development of Aquaman 2, which is also helmed by Wan, has become extremely complicated due to the behind-the-scenes issues involving Heard. The actress is currently embroiled in a high-profile defamation lawsuit filed against her by her ex-husband Johnny Depp. The ongoing trial has resulted in both actors' future projects being cast in doubt. This includes Aquaman 2, which has been filming since before the trial. During recent testimony from Heard at the trial, the actress said that she had been released from her contract with Warner Brothers and was unsure if she will feature in the Aquaman sequel. Heard also said that her role in the original film had been significantly pared down, which she felt was due to her personal legal battles with Depp. What's more, DC Films president Walter Hamada recently confirmed that the studio considered recasting Heard in Aquaman 2. Per the Wrap, Hamada has now revealed a story detail regarding Heard's Mera. The DC Films boss said that screenwriter David Leslie Johnson McGoldrick was already shifting the focus away from Mera before Aquaman 2. Evidently, the sequel was always pitched as a buddy comedy between Jason Momoa and Patrick Wilson. Wow! If the film does indeed primarily focus on the relationship between Aquaman and Orm, it will certainly be an interesting narrative swerve. The first Aquaman wasn't without its comedic points, but the adventure film franchise would be leaning even further into the lighter tone that differentiated from the other projects in the DC Extended Universe, were it to take on a buddy comedy tone. If this is the case, it could also make phasing Heard out of the franchise easier for Warner Bros. And DC, should they choose to do so, Heard previously testified in the trial that she fought really hard to stay in Aquaman 2 at all, claiming that the studio didn't want to include her in the film. However, Heard's co-star Momoa and director Wan reportedly supported her continued involvement. Given the rift between Orm and Aquaman at the end of the previous movie, their buddy comedy relationship would certainly be rather contentious and dangerous. If anything, it seems that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom may be drawing inspiration from the relationship between Thor and Loki in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Typically, DC's efforts to mimic Marvel's success have not gone well. But this new wrinkle is certainly an interesting proposition that could give a brand new flavour to the familiar hero. First of all, a buddy comedy between Arthur and Orm is a natural progression to what happened at the end of the first movie. Arthur says to him, "When you're ready to talk, I'll be here." So Arthur is open to healing the rifts of these two half-brothers, even though Orm has not. But obviously we see Orm fall when he sees Nicole Kidman's Queen Atlanta. He embraces her. Actually, when I first saw the movie, I was scared he was going to stab her in the back or something. Literally. I was scared, but he didn't. And he loves his mother, and I think he's ready. He's ready to try and form some kind of relationship with Arthur, and I think that's the natural progression. A buddy comedy, I don't think is a big leap, but you don't want this film to be overly funny, and I don't think it will be. I think it will be just as epic as the first movie. Right. That thing I'm happy with. I don't think it's controversial. Some Snyder fans will say, "Oh, a comedy, typical, they're trying to copy the MCU." Maybe they're not. And this thing that they're copying, the Thor and Loki thing, is nonsense by this journalist. Why? Pick up an Aquaman comic. You know, the dynamic between these two characters in the comics is there to be seen. Sometimes they're fighting, sometimes they're close. ultimately Orm always betrays him, like Loki always betrays Thor. It's a similar thing. If anyone's copying anyone, it's actually the Thor movies copying the dynamic from the Aquaman comics. So let's be clear about that. But have you read your Mera? Do you know who Mera is? Mera is such an important character in the pantheon of DC Comics. And to reduce her to under 10 minutes because you're uncomfortable with the actress and the controversy surrounding her, that's bad enough. But to get up in court and make up this story about chemistry, I think he's telling the truth about the chemistry, but it never bothered them in the first movie and they kept her. And they just about got away with it. And by the end of the movie, I'm thinking, well, Amber isn't a really great actress or anything, but she pulled it off. And I kind of like her as Mera. Let's go with this. That was before the controversy. But now we know they're not going to make any money if Amber Heard continues to be involved. That's why they reduced her minutes and her screen time. It's obvious they should have recast her. But recasting is very, very tricky because people get used to that actor. Let's not forget, not everyone hates Amber Heard. Not everyone knows about what's going on between Johnny and Amber. That's something to remember. Maybe people would have come to the table, but ultimately, keeping her means you don't make enough money. So Jason Momoa and James Wan's kind of resistance to recasting her is an issue. Now, I believe it's not because they like her, it's because of continuity, and I think that was their issue all the time. They have unfollowed her on Instagram. She has unfollowed them. And, you know, the Aquaman official social media page, she's unfollowed them as well on social media. It's not a happy camp. So again, this is another issue for David Zaslav. What the fuck do you do with this movie? Is it going to work? Are people going to come and see it? No, because Amber Heard's in it. It's just another mess. And, you know, we're talking about Michael Sutton. Sorry, say that again. We were talking about Mikey Sutton's article earlier. And it's true. The only two things you can do here is restore the Snyderverse or start again. But then the question is, the deeper question is, what do you do with these 5 upcoming movies? As I said earlier, no Batgirl release date. Aquaman's problematic. The Flash movie is very problematic for different reasons. So then you've got The Rock's Black Adam, where there's no issues, but he's within the same mess of a franchise. So that's troubling. And you've got Shazam! Fury of the Gods, which is probably going to be a solid family movie again, but it's part of the same shit show as the other shit. I've said it before. I wouldn't bother releasing any of these movies, as ugly and as uncomfortable as it is, and as desperate as I am to see them. I have seen the Flash movie, by the way, but I'm itching to see Black Adam. I don't see there's a lot of money in these movies whatsoever. And I said yesterday, take Blue Beetle and launch a brand new DC universe. You either do that or you restore the Snyderverse. It's a very difficult position to be in for David Zaslav and Discovery. I like to shout out great geeks, nerds and DC fans on this channel when I see them post something amazing. So this is a Superfan Cosplay Snyder Night at Jeremy Dwayne H1, and he posted this. Warner Brothers Discovery, there's a lot of money on the table. Restore the Snyderverse. Sequels the Snyder Cut could set up. Listen to this is brilliant. Batman versus Deathstroke. Nightmare Midnight Run with Joker, which would be fucking amazing. Justice League 2, it's Manhunter time. And then you've got The Atom Rises. So there are interesting spin-offs to be made here. But we do have to ask the deeper question. Has Zack Snyder got the time to get into this? Well, he will be after Rebel Moon, but what other deals has he got in place? I suspect Zack Snyder would drop everything right now to restore the Snyderverse. The question that David Zaslav and Discovery have to ask themselves, is it financially viable? What's more viable? A brand new franchise with no excess baggage or the Snyderverse? I think these are the decisions on the table. We now know, thanks to Mikey Sutton and many, many good sources, that David Zaslav wants one extended universe that continues from the other. It's funny, really, when you look at the DC Extended Universe. They came in after the MCU was set up. They saw what Feige was doing. You know, the first Avengers was released in 2012. Man of Steel was released in 2013. And all that the DCEU had to do is say, oh my God, look at that. Look at that franchise. We don't have to copy their tone and their humour, but they have arcs, they have phases, they have post-credit scenes. We should do that. There's nothing wrong with taking inspiration from something else as long as you don't copy and paste it. But they did completely the opposite. They brought in a controversial auteur director that the mainstream audience didn't like, that diehard DC Comics fans didn't like. And that is the thing they've been paying for ever since. So does David Zaslav stick or twist? He doesn't like to take risks. He likes sure things. And I think the biggest, surest thing is to start again with a DC live action universe. This has been the DCEU Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives, please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again in the next edition of the DCEU Daily. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.